Okay guys, we're out here at the Pajero again. Today I'm just going to quickly show you how to really quickly swap out your brake pads if you don't need to change your rotors. So how this happens here is you've got two bolts on two slides that run through from here through into here. You've got one at the top and you've got one down here at the bottom. So all we need to do is we need to undo this one here, which is a 17mm spanner, and then we can just flip this whole thing up, and then we can take the old pads out and put the new pads in. That's how easy it is, guys. It's like a 5-minute job. So here's the tools I'm using: just a 17mm ring spanner. I've got a sash clamp, or just a clamp. I've got a stretchy rope to hold the caliper back. I'll also mention that when you pull the pads out, you also need to compress the pistons back into the caliper so you can fit the larger size brake pads in. Once you've got that bottom slide bolt out down here, you can either just pop a screwdriver here and flip this up. I just get hold of my spanner and I just give that a bit of a flip like that, and it pulls it up. And then all I do now is just lift all that back like that. I get my stretchy strap in there and I just hook it over into there like that, so that's not coming back anymore. Okay, and that then gives you access to your brake pad. So you just pull the brake pads out. You might need a screwdriver or something to come out at the bottom there. Make sure you bring the shim with it. So there's the pad there of which side comes out of where. So you'll note that this one doesn't have the little tab. It sits on there. See that tab down there? That sits on the inside, and then we'll pull the other side out. So it just slips out like that, and you'll see that's where the tab was. So that was sitting up in there as a huge fucking truck goes past. Alright, so we've got them out. So the next step is to push these two cylinders in here. Some older models only have the one in the middle there. What I generally do is I just use the old pad and then I slot them in there like that. Yeah, so then I get the clamp and I put these two in here like that, just with the metal piece here and the metal piece, so leaving the pad material on the inside so they're touching each other. I put that on the back nice and flat on the back of the caliper, and then I put this piece here which screws up onto the face of that. Now this doesn't take much pressure, so just don't worry about doing any damage to the back here. So before I go any further with this bit here, I also must mention that you need to come into your engine bay and you need to take your cap off and make sure that when pushing the pistons back in, you're not going to push brake fluid back out of the actual cylinder itself. So make sure you've got plenty of space there to push it back in. Back to this bit here, so you simply just now start screwing that up, but you can see that it's now just pushing that cylinder back in. Right, so again, I'm now just the other piston and it's just really easily going in. I'm not putting much pressure on that at all and just doing it up, and I get it so it's like to a point where I think it's not going to go any further, about there, and then I'll loosen it off and check to see how far the pistons are in. The pistons are all the way in. They're sitting flush with the outside of the housing, and using a flat plate across there or a bit of wood, don't put any sort of clamp on here. Okay, there's got little rubber seals in here. You damage those and you'll get muck and shit in there. Like in all my videos, I just suggest you have a bit of a general look around while you're in here, because you know, so what I'm also doing at the same time is I'm just giving some of these nipples a bit of a grease. So I've got one here, got one in here, right in there, and you've got one up underneath here. If you've got a grease gun, give them a bit of a going over at the same time. Make sure all these are tightened up, make sure that's tightened, make sure all your nuts and bolts are all done up. So we'll slot these pads back in now. The new one's over here. So when you're putting the brake pads in, you'll notice there's a little notch there and a little groove here in that end there. They sit inside there like that. Okay, that's how they slot in, and then they slot in the top. We've got a little bit of a slot in like that. Wasn't holding my tongue the right way. So yeah, so you're slotting in those grooves there and there, okay? And then that's those two pads in. And then what we can do is we can just unhook this from there, and then we can just slide this over. Now you've got to be careful. There's a little rubber cover, and you want to make sure you don't get that all tangled up when you drop this down. It's just a matter of placing the bolt back in, like this one here, this little slide bolt. Now I always put a little bit of grease back on there when I put it in, just to, you know, maintain a bit of lubrication in there. So I just use the bloody wheel bearing grease. And then what I'll tend to do as well is I'll tend to take that one out at the top there and grease that one up while I'm in here as well. Hopefully that's fixed my issue. So I'm going to pop the wheel back on now and take it for a test spin and see if I fix the issue. Okay, so the last thing to remember is to check your reservoir there, and you can see I'm up a little bit, so I'm going to take a little bit out of that. I'm a little bit over the max mark, and put the cap back on, and then that should be done. And don't get any of the brake fluid over your G-Co. You'll end up damaging the G-Co on your car. And if you do need to top that up after all this is said and done, use a premium .4 brake fluid. So no beer cans this time, guys, just brakes. So that's it, guys, all done and dusted. Brake pads in, wheels back on. I'll check those wheel nuts in a little bit just to make sure they stay in after I go for a spin. I'm going to take off. I'm going to brake gently for a bit. I'm not going to run in and just slam on the brakes. Even though it says not to bed them in, well, you don't need to bed them in. I will just brake gently. I'll go around the block a few times just to warm them up and let them cool down a couple of times. There is another video I've done on replacing the rotors, and it goes into detail how to replace the rotors and the brake pad, and also looks at the bearings and so forth like that. So if you're interested in looking at that in a little bit more detail, check out that video. Chuck us a like, guys, if you got some value out of this, and maybe even ultimately subscribe to the channel for all future updates. Alright guys, so I've just been for a quick spin and the brakes have come up perfectly, so there's no pulling from side to side. The brakes pumped up nice. So that's a wrap, guys, all done. So that's an over and out from the Dodgy UIC.